I woke up, but my body didn't. That's the best way I can describe it. I was wide awake, eyes open, brain firing, but I couldn't move a single muscle. My chest felt like someone had placed a slab of concrete on it. I could feel my heartbeat struggling beneath the weight, like it was trying to break through. The ceiling was the same off-white I'd stared at for months in this old apartment, faint cracks forming little rivers through the plaster. The radiator hissed. The city outside was quiet. Everything normal, except for the dark shape standing in the corner of my room. At first, I thought it was a coat on the rack, but then it breathed. Slow, rhythmic, deliberate. It had no features, just a silhouette against the far wall, head tilted slightly like it was studying me. I tried to scream, to move, to do anything, but nothing came out. Only that horrible wet sound of air in my throat. I watched it for what felt like hours until it began to lean forward. I don't know how long it took before I snapped free, before my lungs decided to work again and I lurched upright, gasping so hard I nearly threw up. The corner was empty. My room was still. I sat there shaking, drenched in sweat, my heart hammering like it wanted out of my ribs. I told myself it was just sleep paralysis, something my brain cooked up because I'd pulled a double shift. Nurses see strange things when they're overtired, hallucinations, exhaustion, caffeine jitters. But none of those left handprints. When I finally looked down, I saw them pressed into the sheets near my ribs. 2 deep, wide impressions, as if someone had leaned on me while I slept. I stripped the bed, changed the linens, and stayed awake until dawn. By the time I got to work the next morning, the whole thing already felt stupid, something my brain made bigger than it was. My coworker, Marissa, caught me zoning out by the med cart and laughed. "Rough night?" "Didn't sleep," I said. She smiled. "Welcome to the club." The rest of the shift passed in that weird, detached blur that happens when you haven't slept right. I spilled saline, forgot to chart vitals. My patients all asked if I was sick. I lied and said I was fine. That night I tried to go to bed early. I even set up one of those white noise apps, rainfall, low thunder, something calm. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling cracks again, afraid to close my eyes. When sleep finally came, it wasn't rest. It was like falling into a lake, slow, sinking, suffocating. And then I was back there, awake, but not. My eyes open, the same ceiling, the same corner, except this time, the figure wasn't there. It was closer, right beside my bed. I could feel its breath move my hair. A sound, not quite a voice, more like a rasp, slipped from it. My name, just once. Clara. When I came to again, my alarm was blaring. The sun had barely risen, washing the room in gray. My body ached like I'd been pinned down for hours. I told myself it was all stress, overwork, dehydration, the things we tell ourselves when the alternative is too terrifying to name. Still, before I left for my shift, I caught myself doing something stupid. I looked over my shoulder and whispered, "Don't come back." I stopped sleeping after that second night, or tried to anyway. You can only outrun sleep for so long before it catches you, and when it does, it's never gentle. For the first few days, I fought it with everything I had: coffee, energy drinks, late-night reruns on my laptop, anything to keep my eyes open. But I was still working 12-hour night shifts at the hospital, and there's only so much caffeine can do. On the 3rd night, I passed out in my scrubs the moment I hit the couch. When I opened my eyes, I was home. Or at least, I thought I was. The room was wrong. The ceiling hung lower. The air was thick, humid, hard to breathe. Every sound felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the wall clock, the steady drip, drip, drip of something wet. I realized I couldn't move again. My hands were frozen at my sides. The figure was back, not in the corner this time. It stood beside the couch, its head level with mine, neck craned unnaturally far down, its shoulders scraping the ceiling. Its face, if you could call it that, was blurred, as though my eyes couldn't focus on it. But the eyes were pits, not glowing, not empty, just pits that pulled everything into them. It leaned closer, its weight bending the air. The sound came again, breath mixed with speech. "You left the light on." My lamp across the room flickered once and died. Total blackness. When I woke, the bulb was shattered. I told myself I'd been dreaming again, but the dread stayed long after the sun came up. I'd startle at reflections, flinch at shadows that didn't match their owners. My coworkers noticed. "Maybe it's stress," said Dr. Sue, one of the residents. "Night terrors are common in people who work nights. Your circadian rhythm's shot." Marissa offered something less clinical. "You need a vacation, a week somewhere sunny." I nodded and smiled like I agreed, but every time I blinked too long, I saw it standing there, in the corners, in the polished steel of the medication fridge, in the reflection of a patient's darkened window. The more I noticed it, the more present it felt, like attention gave it shape. That night, I recorded myself sleeping. I left my phone camera aimed at the bed, the flash on low. I figured if I caught myself flailing or jerking awake, maybe it'd explain things. Maybe there'd be proof that this was all in my head. When I woke, I didn't remember dreaming. The sun was out, and for once, I felt halfway normal. Then I checked the recording. It showed me sleeping peacefully for hours. Then, around 3:17 a.m., the frame shimmered, like heat distortion. Something darker than the shadows slid into view at the edge of the bed. The lens struggled to focus. You could barely make it out. A tall figure crouched low beside me, its outline bending the light around it. The video ended there. No jump scare, no noise, just a static hiss. I deleted it immediately. That day, my therapist told me to take melatonin, avoid caffeine, and practice deep breathing before bed. She said, "The mind can create entire worlds out of exhaustion." But I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. Not the shadow, but the shape it made against the mattress. It was pressing down on me. And as much as I wanted to believe that it wasn't real, the small, rational part of my brain whispered something I didn't want to admit. If the mind can create worlds, maybe something else can use them. 2 nights later, one of my patients died in his sleep. He was a quiet old man named Mr. Leeds, pneumonia, late stage, nothing unexpected. But before it happened, he'd grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and said, "It sits on my chest at night. Can't breathe. I see it. I hear it." I thought he was delirious from the fever. Now I'm not so sure. Because when I went to check on him at 3 a.m., his vitals were fine, steady. The monitors hummed their soft lullaby. Then everything flatlined at once. Heart rate, oxygen, blood pressure. I ran for the crash cart, but his face was calm, eyes open, fixed on the ceiling. And when I leaned over him, the air above his body felt wrong, thick, electric, as if something unseen had just left the room. We called it respiratory failure, The doctor signed off. We moved on. But I couldn't stop thinking about his words. It sits on my chest at night. That was the same night the hospital intercom glitched. I was walking the east wing when it came on, just a burst of static and the whisper through the speakers. I froze, listening. My name came through clear as day. Clara. Then silence. The system wasn't even active. The PA computer had been down since evening rounds. I didn't tell anyone. I finished the shift, went home, and sat in my car for an hour before going inside. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The sun was up, but everything still looked dim, like daylight couldn't reach me anymore. That night, I slept sitting upright on the couch with every light in the apartment blazing. No dreams, just that thick dread pressing down on me like a second skin. In the morning, I found 3 long scratches down my right shoulder blade. Shallow, parallel, too far apart to be fingernails. I watched the footage again from the camera I'd left running. Same angle, same grainy darkness. Around 2:58 a.m., the shadows deepened, bending inward as if the air itself had weight. Then my body tensed on the screen. My head jerked to the side, and the blanket rose, lifted several inches by something unseen. The audio spiked with static, and a voice came through, distorted and low. "You shouldn't have left." I slammed my laptop shut so hard, the screen cracked. By my next shift, I was unraveling. Marissa caught me in the break room, staring at nothing. "You okay?" she asked. I didn't answer. I was watching the reflection of the door in the vending machine glass. Someone was standing behind me. I turned. No one. That morning, I called out sick for the first time in years. My therapist didn't pick up, so I drove aimlessly until I ended up parked outside St. Luke's Cemetery, the same one near the hospital. I didn't even remember turning in, and there, in the rearview mirror, I saw it again, standing between the stones, still, watching. That was when I realized something I hadn't before. It wasn't waiting for me to fall asleep anymore. It was learning how to follow me while I was awake. I packed that night. No plan, no destination, just an animal instinct screaming, "Get out." By dawn, I was halfway to Washington, driving north through the rain, the wipers dragging like nails on glass. I told myself I was visiting my mom, that I needed rest. But deep down, I knew I was running. Her house sat on a wooded ridge outside of Shelton, quiet, old, wrapped in fog that never really lifted. The kind of place that used to feel safe. She hugged me at the door, frowned at how thin I'd gotten. "You look exhausted," she said. "I just need a few nights of sleep." She made me tea. We talked about nothing. She didn't press. That night, I crawled into my childhood bed, the same one under the slanted roof, the same chipped dresser, the same creaky ceiling fan that used to keep me awake as a kid. The air smelled faintly of cedar and dust, comforting, familiar. For the first time in weeks, I felt almost calm. I left the light on. When I woke, the room was pitch black, power out. I couldn't move. The pressure hit first, that familiar crushing weight on my chest, but it was heavier now, smarter. It pressed in rhythm with my heartbeat, learning the pulse. I tried to open my mouth but couldn't. Something brushed my neck, a hand, cold and dry, fingertips tracing my throat like it was counting. Then the floorboards creaked. Footsteps, slow, coming down the hallway outside my door. I wanted to scream for my mother, but the sound wouldn't come. The footsteps stopped right outside the room. I could hear it breathing, shallow, deliberate. The doorknob turned. A sliver of gray light spilled in from the hallway. The silhouette stood there, taller than the doorway, shoulders scraping the frame. It ducked inside, the door shut without a sound. And then it spoke, in my mother's voice. "You can rest now, Clara." The light flickered back on. The room was empty. The door still closed. I fell to the floor, gasping, every muscle on fire. My mother found me there at sunrise, eyes wide open, unresponsive. She said I was cold as ice, lips blue, like I hadn't breathed for minutes. Later that morning, I checked my phone. The camera had recorded again. I watched in silence as the screen showed me sleeping, perfectly still. Then, at 2:59 a.m., the door in the background opened by itself. A shape entered, too tall, head tilted, its movements jerky like a marionette learning how to walk. It stopped beside the bed and leaned down until its face was inches from mine. Then, for the first time, it looked directly at the camera. The footage warped, colors bending, pixels smearing into static. But before the feed cut, I caught a glimpse of something impossible. Its face slowly shifting, molding itself into mine. The rest of the day, I stayed awake, every light on, dog curled up outside the room, refusing to cross the threshold. When I closed my eyes, even for a second, I could feel it hovering nearby, waiting. That night, I taped every window shut, shoved a dresser against the door, and sat in bed with the lights blazing. At 3 a.m., the bulbs dimmed. The room exhaled. And from somewhere in the corner, in the darkness just beyond the reach of the lamp, I heard my own voice whisper, "You shouldn't have left." I don't remember the last time I really slept. Whatever happens when I close my eyes now doesn't feel like rest. It feels like exchange, like something crawls into me while I'm unconscious and leaves part of itself behind. Days blur. I forget what I've said and to whom. My mother says I talk in my sleep, full conversations, sometimes arguments, sometimes laughter. She doesn't tell me what about. I see the worry in her eyes, the fear that I'm breaking. Maybe I am. But I know this much. It's not in my head anymore. It's here. It started whispering during the day. At first, faint, my name in another room, like someone calling from down the hall. Then clearer. Sometimes it sounds like my mother, sometimes like me. Once, when I was brushing my teeth, it spoke through the running faucet, the rippling sound forming words. "You can't ignore me." I dropped the glass. It shattered. The water kept running. That night, I dreamed I was standing in the hospital hallway again. The fluorescents buzzed overhead, flickering. At the far end, Mr. Leeds, the dead patient, was sitting up in his bed, motionless. Something stood behind him. It wore my face. When I woke, my mother was in my doorway, crying. "You were standing in the hallway," she said. "But when I called your name, you didn't turn around. You just walked backward into the dark." I started researching then. Anything I could find on sleep paralysis, night terrors, folklore. The name that kept coming up was the night visitor, an entity said to feed on exhaustion, to wear the faces of those it watches until it becomes them completely. The more one fears it, the stronger it grows. Every story ended the same way. People stopped sleeping, then stopped waking. I tore out the pages of my sleep journal, burned them in the sink, but one page wouldn't catch. It was the last entry, written in my handwriting, dated that same morning. "It's not coming to you anymore. You brought it." The ink bled and spread across the paper like veins. That night, I moved to the guest room. My mother begged me to see a doctor. I told her I would. I lied. Around midnight, I heard her knock softly. "Clara, you awake?" Her voice sounded normal, tired, kind, familiar. But through the crack under the door, the light wasn't moving like it should. It pulsed, slow and wet, like something breathing. I didn't answer. Then, from behind me, from the darkness of the room itself, her voice whispered again. "Clara, let me in." The doorknob turned. I woke up in the hallway, the guest room door wide open behind me. My mother was standing at the other end, pale and shaking. She said I'd been talking in my sleep again, asking questions in her voice. When I looked past her shoulder, I saw something move in the reflection of the kitchen window. A second me, standing perfectly still, smiling faintly. I blinked. It was gone. By morning, I'd made up my mind. If this thing wanted me, it could have me. But I'd see it for what it was. No more pretending it wasn't real. I set up the camera again, this time pointed straight at my face. I left a note beside it. "If you find this, don't wake me." And then I waited for sleep to take me, praying that when it came, I'd finally see its true face. I don't remember falling asleep. One moment I was staring into the glow of the camera's red light. The next I was somewhere else, a place that looked almost like my room, but not quite. The walls pulsed faintly, as if breathing. The air shimmered like heat above asphalt. I couldn't move. The sheets were pressed tight against me, though I hadn't tucked them in that way. The room was darker than any darkness I'd ever seen. No shadows, no light leaking in from the hall, just a void that felt like it was leaning closer. Then I saw it. At first, it was crouched near the foot of the bed, knees bent backward, head tilted in that same awful angle. It didn't crawl this time. It rose, vertebrae cracking one by one like breaking twigs. It had my face now. Not perfectly, wrong around the mouth, the smile too wide, the eyes too dull, but enough that I felt a sick familiarity, like looking at an old photo of yourself right before you died. "You see me," it said. "You made me." Its voice came from everywhere, through the floorboards, through the walls, through me. I tried to scream, but the air wouldn't move. Then it leaned over, pressing its copy of my hand to my chest. The weight came again, immense, suffocating, almost tender. "You called me when you were tired," it whispered. "You invited me in every time you opened your eyes." I felt the pressure sink deeper, my ribs groaning, my lungs fluttering like moth wings under glass. The edges of the world began to fade, colors draining into gray. "Now rest." When my mother found the footage the next morning, I was gone. Not missing, just different. The video showed me lying still on the bed, breathing softly. Around 2:57 a.m., the camera shook once. A figure stepped into frame, shaped exactly like me, but standing impossibly still. It bent down until its face was inches from mine, whispering something the microphone barely caught. Then both of us inhaled at the same time. Perfect sync. At 3:03, I sat upright. The other me didn't move. It stayed on the bed, eyes closed, breathing faintly. I looked straight into the camera and smiled. "I woke up," I said, but my body didn't. The file ends there. My mother tells people I moved away. She keeps the door to my old room closed now. Sometimes, late at night, she swears she hears someone walking inside, slow, deliberate steps, pausing just long enough between each to listen. She says it sounds like me, and if you ever wake in the middle of the night, pinned to your bed, unable to move, whispering that it's just sleep paralysis, don't look at the corner. Because once you see it, it sees you. If you've made it this far, don't turn off the lights just yet. Stories like this one, they don't always end on the last line. Clara thought it was just sleep paralysis, just exhaustion, just her mind playing tricks. But some things don't live in your head. They live in the spaces between waking and dreaming. And once they learn your name, they don't forget it. If you're listening to this alone, maybe you should check the corners of your room, just once, before you try to sleep tonight. And if you hear something whisper back, don't open your eyes. Thanks for spending another night around the fire with me. If you enjoyed the story, help the channel grow. Like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next tale. This has been Campfire Horror Stories, where every story starts with a flicker and ends in the dark.